welcome back to Millennial Vinyl. Thanks for dropping in again. I'm Peter, still. I just finished the Geddy Lee autobiography, My Effin Life. I was fortunate enough last month to go see My Effin Life in conversation at the Orpheum in Boston, which was a really cool experience. Ged, along with guest host Eric McCormick from Will and Grace, kind of gave a SparkNotes version of the book. Geddy took some time to read some passages from it. All in all, it was a interesting and fun experience. I was super stoked actually to be to have the privilege to see Geddy on stage again, which I hadn't seen him since 2015, the last time he was in town with Rush. So getting a chance to sort of see him move around and be in his natural element, you know, albeit in different circumstances, but at least on stage again, was a nice treat. The point of today's video is going to be to kind of talk about that, but more my impressions of the book. And before we get into all of that, I just kind of wanted to give a brief idea, or the state of the Rush Union, for lack of a better way to put it. One of the big takeaways I get from consuming the book is that Geddy wants to make music, whether it be with Alex or without him, calling it Rush, not calling it Rush. The man's soul is crying out to be, you know, to have at least the artistic part of his soul is crying out to be acknowledged. And I think for those of us so inclined to see that happen again, it's important that however we can, we sort of let our opinions be known that, hey, Geddy, if you want to get back with Alex and call it Rush, or if you want to put together your own band and go out and play music, we're gonna come out and see it. We're gonna buy the record. All of these shows for, you know, his In Conversation shows have been well attended, which I think will be at least encouraging enough to him to know that there's still interest out there, that like even though Rush hasn't put out a new album in over a decade and hasn't toured in almost a decade, that there's still a real appetite for the band. That kind of leads me into my next sort of Rush bullet point. We're coming into 2024, which means that Grace Under Pressure is the next album to hopefully get the 40th anniversary box set treatment. This is the most recent one for Signals. For the most part, these have been well received. I haven't opened this one just yet. I'm kind of keeping it for posterity. And there's also no live show with this one, which is sort of annoying, especially considering how good the live album that they put with Moving Pictures was. It's better than Exit Stage Left by a considerable margin. And to not have that with this one was a little aggravating. So Grace Under Pressure is my favorite album. I think that not only by Rush, but like by anybody. I think that's the only one that I'm going to have like real strong opinions on one way or the other, like what they decide to put with it, how seriously they take sort of celebrating it, because, you know, it's not Moving Pictures from a critical or, you know, sales certification standpoint, right? You know, it sold maybe a third of what Moving Pictures sold, and the songs on Grace Under Pressure, while important to me, are not as culturally identifiable as Tom Sawyer or, you know, Red Barchetto or Limelight, certainly. So I get that, you know, if we are lucky enough, or if I'm lucky enough anyway, to be able to get a 40th box set of Grace, like, it's probably not. It's going to be probably more like this than it was like the Moving Pictures one, which is, you know, those are my own expectations that need to be tempered. And anyway, so that's on the horizon. Also, I pulled out a few of their more recent. I don't know if the glare is going to be popping out, but they've released some concerts. on vinyl, including Clockwork Angels. I don't know if R40 got the vinyl treatment. If it has, I haven't seen it. I'll look again, but that's something I would like to have. And it made me wonder if and when Different Stages is ever going to get released as a vinyl option. So for those of you who have either forgotten or aren't familiar with, or whatever, Different Stages, which is, here's my CD copy with my ticket stub. I saw them on the Tesseract tour at Great Woods in Mansfield, Mass. With my dad, and some tracks that are on this album were actually recorded that night. So somewhere in the crowd noise is are me, my dad, and actually my Aunt Elaine. Can't forget her. The three of us went yelling and screaming. Well, at least my dad and I were. My aunt was kind of just side-eyeing us the whole time because she didn't get it, but whatever. A very young me and a much younger version of my dad yelling and screaming for our favorite band. And it's neat to always have that memento and that memory. And I think it's something that I would really, as a being a vinyl fanatic, it would be nice to have that version or that recording in that in that medium to have. And these are things that I would love to hear your thoughts on. What Rush releases that aren't out yet would you like to see given the vinyl treatment? Should Grace Under Pressure get a box set? Should Power Windows? Where should they stop? Should they just keep going? All of those things. Now let's kind of transition to talking about what I thought of Geddy's book. The show, the conversation show that we got to see was neat. I had no expectations, because I had never experienced or gone to or done anything like that. There was a lot of people there for something that was, I think, in a better version of that would be something would have been something far more intimate. But I also understand that you can't just get 40 people in a room to talk to Geddy. That would probably get like a little ridiculous. So strength in numbers on both sides, I think, it was an enjoyable experience. I have more to say about the book than I do about the show, so we'll just get into what I thought about the book. We'll start with the good stuff first. He talks about thinking of music not only in just like creating melody, but like recording it and taking the stereo spectrum into account when mixing and recording an album. And like made me think about when you want to say something, especially something important, like how you say it matters almost as much as like what you say. Or you emphasize the part of your point that you want to be heard clearest, and you where you put your adjectives and which adjectives you choose. Like sometimes how you say something is way more important than what you say, or how you say something could alter the what of what you're saying. And to know that's kind of true for recorded music is interesting, and was interesting for me to read. I felt that on the whole, I did get a chance to feel a lot of things while digesting the book. I got to think not only about that, but about some heavier stuff, which we'll get into. But I also laughed a lot, especially when he was making fun of Alex Lifeson, Rush guitarist. Everybody who's watching this knows that, though, and is probably aware of the level of their banter too. I found that his admiration and the artistic pedestal that he put Neil Peart on was appropriate. I think it was his way without being overt about it, it was his way of eulogizing him, at least for us. And I thought it was touching the way he spoke about Neil for the most part. When it didn't need to be, it wasn't, and that's fine. But like when it had to be, it was, and that was good. It's unfortunate that I didn't, but I am an obsessive and a fanatic, so it's difficult for me to hear or read things that I haven't sort of sought out before. But it was quasi disappointing that most of the anecdotes that Geddy shared, not only about his life but about the band, especially about the band, it was pretty much stuff that had been sourced from other places before. If you want to get a more comprehensive history of Rush the band, Beyond the Lighted Stage is still a much better source for that. And that being said, this is Geddy's life story. It's not Rush's autobiography. It's Geddy's. So there's going to be some separation there. As much as Geddy is tied to Rush, and we're reading about Geddy's life because of Rush, there is still more to Geddy's life than Rush. So I do understand that, and I had to remind myself that as a reader, like, okay, this is Geddy's story, this isn't Rush's story. So if you go into this expecting to get like wall-to-wall Rush, you will leave slightly disappointed. And for the Rush obsessives, the Rush that's in this book is not groundbreaking stuff. The groundbreaking stuff that did exist was irritating as hell for me. And this is where I'm going to be critical. For instance, and this part of the critique is more of a critique of me than it is a critique of Geddy, but it's still worth mentioning. As a Rush fan, one of the aspects of my fandom was tied to the fact that Rush seemed to elevate above the hedonistic tendencies of rock and rollers. Whatever hedonism they exhibited was in how they indulged themselves in making their music, with really long songs and really odd time signatures and almost like thumbing their noses at commerciality of any kind, which had a double-pronged effect, right? Like, it not only indulged their creativity, but it also helped give their fans a sort of rallying cry and an identity. Like, it gave us a collective identity to grasp onto too. So their hedonism actually had altruistic, or at least artistically interesting results. Other bands and other artists' hedonism had artistically interesting results too. They're just sort of more depressing to read about and to digest as a consumer. So to read and to find out that Geddy had more than a casual relationship to hard drugs was disheartening. Now again, having my perception ruined, the only thing that's happening there is that an idea that I had was proved to be incorrect. It doesn't change anything about the work that he created or the art that he made and will continue to make, hopefully. But it does change the affinity that I have for Rush as the people of the band, not necessarily of the band and their work. Those are two different relationships that you have as a fan. All in all, Rush to me and me to Rush, that relationship has been aces on both sides. I have been and will continue to be an A-plus consumer of Rush. I buy everything that is released. I attend everything that I can. I am a good customer. And Rush makes and will hopefully continue to make a good product. So from that aspect, there can't be any hard feelings on either side of that equation, and ultimately that is the only relationship that they are ever going to care about. Thus, I should only care about that relationship. Again, though, it'll be a lot harder for me to wave their flag with any sort of like moral – affinity, because the greatest part for me about Rush is that they were so unlike everybody else. But it turns out, and this isn't as obvious as saying, oh, they're people too. Obviously, they're people too. But it turns out, well, Geddy at least is just another rock star. Doing stupid shit to get drugs, acting like an asshole, being self-important. Like, it's important to know that as a fan, so I don't continue with this sort of like false understanding or like, proceeding with this false narrative about the man. But it doesn't make it any less disheartening to find out that actually, yeah, he was a rock star in the 70s and 80s. Yeah, he did cocaine. A lot of it. And he did some shady shit to get it, too. Like, that part of it was like, I just really wanted him and the band, especially, to be above that. And they weren't. And their relationship to that stuff kind of lasted a lot longer than I think any of us, or at least I thought. I have to stop speaking generally. I'm speaking specifically. And that sucks. I think when you get to a certain place in your life, right, you choose very carefully who you associate with and who you surround yourself with and who you bring in. And also you sort of keenly understand that who you surround yourself is a reflection of who you are. And if you want to project a certain version of yourself out onto the world, you will curate the people around you with that in mind. That being said, I don't know how actual or factual this is, but my perception of Geddy, again, as a man, is that he's a little bit of a starfucker. The anecdotes that he sort of peppered into the story were almost always, when they weren't tied specifically to Rush or the creating of an album, for instance. Anything about Geddy's life that was sort of anecdotally added almost always centered on somebody who was as or more famous than he. If you look at his Instagram and the things that he projects out now to the world, the photos are with someone who is as or more famous than he. Occasionally he will celebrate or make mention of something that is not quite on his level, but any visual is almost always attached to somebody of that ilk. And starfuckery is, I think, for me at least, it's also a little disheartening. It's like, I think Ged's tonality as a writer sort of amplified what I'm about to say too. I mean, if you've read the book, please share your comments and tell me if I'm crazy or if you agree with me. He went to great lengths to, while in one sense letting the reader into his life, I feel like he went through to great lengths to make the divide between he and the reader as wide as possible. And that really sucked. And it also made me sort of not feel the emotional stakes that he was talking about. Case in point, I feel like there were instances where he was obviously in the wrong, and he would make mention of that and say, okay, this was my bad. And anytime Geddy talked about anything with any real stakes, he didn't take 100% responsibility for anything. Now, maybe there are no situations where anything with real stakes has 100% culpability. But, I don't know, just as a man, I always feel like it is important to own a few of those in your life. Even in situations where you may not necessarily feel like you have to. And, again, don't meet your heroes, right? Like, that's a popular and well shared and well used phrase in our culture, and it's not that I had a real or actual conversation with him, but spending the 2 hours at the show, and then I listened to the audiobook too, and that was another 14 or 15 hours. So that's a long period of time of like hearing this person talk to me about himself, which again is, if you think about that too, like hearing anybody talk about themselves for that period of time would would get grading probably, which is why, autobiographies are always tricky, because no matter what happens, the person writing it always kind of comes off as a douche, no matter what, because it's tough to tell your story without kind of being douchey, because chances are, if you're interesting enough to write an autobiography, and you've done interesting and you've interesting things, and you have been successful, it's super difficult to not at least come off a little bit like that. So I do appreciate the difficulty in sort of balancing all of that. But that being said, I found some of the things that he talked about to be, again, like he was trying to make some clear separation between himself and people who weren't like him. And it just, I wanted to come away from reading this book like to feel like I had a greater understanding of the person, and maybe I do. And maybe it just says more about my perception that I don't like him as much after reading the book as I did going into it. And that can be tied to a couple of things, right? That could be my perception, or my expectations were wrong, and it's better to be right and feel like shit than it is to be wrong and feel good, almost always. So my perception of Geddy as a man and Geddy as a musician are always going to be at odds now, because the esteem that I hold him in as a musician is never going to change. It's never going to go away. But the things I thought of him as a man weren't true, and like the acceptance of that as an admirer, former admirer, I don't know how to phrase it, is a difficult thing to process. I'll close on sort of a somber note. The third chapter is an oral history of his mother, his aunt, and his grandmother's experience during the Holocaust, and his dad's to a degree too. What his family had to go through to survive was a harrowing thing to hear. I listened to the audiobook, and to hear him talk about that, and to hear the things that they had to endure to survive was heartbreaking. And it's important that he did that, because firsthand accounts of that time are few and far between now, and soon will be completely gone. And he has a responsibility as a person for his family, especially a person of means and with some import, to tell that story too. So not only does it not get lost for us as the greater culture, but it doesn't get lost for his family either, to know that like they came from that and through that. Never mind from that, through that. They came through that to still exist and to prosper and to live. And kudos to Geddy for, which must have been an extraordinarily difficult thing to do. And I'm a better and more studied individual for having read that account. Tell me what you think about the book. If you saw the tour, where you saw it, what you want in terms of box sets and live albums, what you'd like to see happen with the musicians Geddy Lee and Alex Lifeson. If you read Ged's book, what you thought about what he had to say about him. Yeah, all in all, it was not the experience I was expecting, or in many ways the experience I was hoping for, but it's the one I got. So that's my sort of like right off the cuff, like firsthand impressions of everything. I think given some time, and especially if they release more music, and I get back to, if everybody gets back to their roles quickly, I think that will be good. But if this is like sort of Geddy's last word, that might be more difficult for me as a fan of not only Rush, but of, I guess of him. The quicker everybody sort of gets back to where they're supposed to be. Me buying and listening to the music and going to the shows, and Geddy making the music and communicating to me through those means, as opposed to the way he communicated with me here and here. I think the quicker we get back to that, the better. And which it doesn't take away from him as a writer. I thought the writing was interesting, and like I said, it made me feel a bunch of things. But I don't like where I ended up, so I'd like to go back. I'd like to at least get back somewhat to where I was with Geddy Lee and Rush before the book. And so that's where I'm at. So let me know what you think. Thanks for dropping by, and we'll see you again soon.